Hello. So this is my second dev journal entry for Ghostfire. Um, so today we're going to be looking for the first time at one of my original designs. So let's fire it up. So this is a pattern that is based on Will-O-The-Wisps. So it's kind of based around this special bullet here that kind of teleports around the level and fires upon you in a circular fashion. Um, and right now, this isn't quite solid yet. It needs some balancing, mainly in terms of um, the rate of fire and rotation for the bullets, things like how long the wisp stays on screen in each position, and stuff like that. But the basic pieces are all in place. I'm also going to probably have more wisps. I think that this is probably sufficient for easy. Um, we'll see how that goes. I'm still not 100% on how I want to handle difficulties in this game, because there is plans to have a kind of dynamic difficulty for it in the first place. So kind of balancing different tiers of difficulty plus dynamic difficulty might actually be a bit much. A lot of that isn't really set in stone yet. Um, so we'll see about that. But yeah, the one thing I want to do is, at least for normal mode, um, or whatever type of higher difficulty we end up having, that we can add more wisps. We might go even higher at greater difficulties. I don't know. But this is relatively simple as is. I originally didn't have any plans to um, have the boss itself shooting, but this is kind of an important thing, especially when you have random attacks, um, is to consider about what happens if the player doesn't move. Um, and this is kind of a common pattern where you have kind of undirected or kind of very pattern-based bullets that aren't necessarily fired at the player, and these are almost always complemented by homing shots. And the reason for that is just to keep the player moving, because if you get unlucky or if the bullet density isn't very high, the player might actually be able to stand still for quite a long time and not end up having to move very much. And as you can see, the homing bullets um, at least keep the player kind of moving. You kind of have to pay attention to two different layers of patterns, which will definitely be emphasized further if we have multiple wisps floating around. And this also introduces some issues that do need to be solved. The boss doesn't move much, which means actually trying to fire on it while it's firing homing shots at you um, is kind of a little unwieldy, because you kind of have to shimmy back and forth. In truth, the player bullets and the boss's hitbox should both probably be a lot bigger. Um, and that's something that I'll probably be playing with over time. Because the one thing that you want to keep in mind is that generally you should be pretty generous in favor of the player in both sides, which means that bullets should be smaller than they look, which isn't relevant right now because everything is exactly the size of its hitbox. But the real graphics might be, bigger, so that there's a little more give. We're getting some slowdown here. Um, oh well. We're actually in the net where the so hacks can compile to different platforms, and we're in Netgo right now, which is kind of lightweight to compile but low performance. So slowdowns here, especially in debug mode, are not a big deal. I think I was doing this in C, the C platform before, which does take a while to kind of compile, so it's not that convenient for development. But let's see. But yeah, the other end of that is that it should be very easy for the player to hit things, especially since the point of bullet hells generally isn't like target practice, where you're trying to like hit very small targets. Usually, the player's attention is going to be focused on where they are. They're not going to be looking at the enemy. They're just going to generally, get a sight on where they are and fire in that direction, which means that you should be pretty generous. If they're in the general area, they should probably hit, especially with bosses. Boss hitboxes in like Toho and stuff tend to be pretty massive. So that's something to probably play with. I'm more inclined to make the hitbox smaller when that's all I have to see, just so it doesn't look weird. Once we have real graphics, the the size of the hitbox will have less of an aesthetic impact. Um, they're just circles anyway. But anyway, one other thing I want to demonstrate, I added a debug difficulty, which is just kind of used for miscellaneous debugging. So I can just switch to a different mode. So we can see here that the wisp behaves a little bit differently. It doesn't stay in any one place for very long, and it leaves behind a bullet that doesn't move. And this lets me get an idea of how its randomness is behaving in a live situation, as opposed to guessing just based on assuming that the random number generator is sound. Which will especially be useful if I decide to handle random number generation differently. One thing that I've been thinking about is that I don't want to use truly random numbers or pseudo-random with an unpredictable seed. I kind of want to make it so that this is deterministic. And the reason that might be useful is because if I want to save replays of the player stuff, and I do, it would probably be good. It would be way easier to play back the player's stuff through the engine if everything about the playthrough was deterministic, which means all the information we would need would be the player's sequence of actions. Now there are some problems with this. For example, if the player finds a safe spot by standing still, then that safe spot will always exist, no matter what happens. There won't be any kind of random events to shake the player out of doing that. And that's one reason why it might be good to have these homing bullets, just to force the player to move. Man, frame rate is not so good. Not surprising, considering I'm recording and also generating unlimited number of bullets. But yeah, and so I think that covers pretty much everything I have for now. Like I said, most of what I have to do now is just balancing and figuring out how I want to add in multiple wisps. I figure each wisp will kind of have its own portion of the screen so that they don't like awkwardly overlap each other. And you can see I've kind of tried to put the wisp in a fair position so that it won't ever like go into the player space. This could probably stand to be a little bit wider in the downward direction. It's a little bit tricky to telegraph to the player that the wisp might teleport into this zone. Like how to communicate to the player which areas are safe. One thing that might be useful is to have some kind of graphic to indicate where the wisp is about to appear. Because the point of the teleporting isn't, to just like completely kill off the player by telefragging them. It's really just to kind of make the direction of the attacks unpredictable. And to give kind of capture that feel, that thematic feel of like Will-O-The-Wisp, being kind of strange and unpredictable. Basically the pattern that I'm going for here is kind of it's for a boss that is kind of themed around ghosts. It is a ghostly boss. And that's kind of a big thing that I find interesting in Toho, is how bullet patterns are usually used to represent concepts. Like, there are characters with attacks themed around like cold, or falling leaves or that kind of thing. That gives it a little bit more life beyond just being, a bunch of bullets. So I really want to carry that through and have patterns that kind of capture an idea. Um, and one thing I kind of want to play with is adding more to it at higher difficulties. Particularly, I'm thinking that in hard mode you might have like a circle of bullets that kind of follow you for a bit and then lock in place to limit your movements. That kind of spin around the player. Um, Something might be interesting to play with. And I also I might come back to this and polish it later. Because I mean, obviously, like the final version of each spell card isn't going to be coming for a long time. I shouldn't call them spell cards, because this isn't Toho. The fact that I'm kind of making a Toho clone is a little bit obvious because it's the only bullet hell I've ever played. I do hope to make it stand out at least a bit, um, and kind of introduce my own ideas. Once I get the actual game specific mechanics in place, which I'll probably talk about in more detail in another dev journal. Um, I think that will help it to stand out. But but yeah, like this is very much in the Toho style, and I'm not gonna pretend that it's not. But hopefully I'll have another thing to show off. Like I said, I'm probably not gonna bother too much polishing these. Like there's kind of like separate stages here where polishing the engine and the look and feel of the game and actually making the patterns. Um, and those will kind of go back and forth. I think that right now my energy is best suited to kind of generating ideas, generating pattern concepts, and then that will give me direction for what I want to polish up, and stuff like that. Um, and a big thing, and this is where I'm going to need testers, hint hint, eventually, is I'm going to need someone to tell me um, how difficult these things are. Like, this by itself right now strikes me as like actually kind of trivially easy. Um, and I don't know if like someone who's never played a bullet hell before might actually find this somewhat challenging, which is about what I'm going for easy mode. Um, Other higher difficulties would have like faster shots, more wisps, possibly other embellishments to make it more interesting. But that's definitely something I'm gonna have to play with. Like, I don't think I'm a great bullet hell player, but I'm definitely probably at the upper end, I suppose. I'm no expert, but I've done some pretty crazy stuff in Toho that I'm kind of proud of. But we'll see. The balancing aspect is definitely gonna be probably pretty hard to do because obviously that's not just simple programming. That's kind of you have to consider the human element of the game design. But I've spent way too long rambling on this already, so I should probably turn this off and let you guys watch it and stuff. So, hope to see you soon.